Well. Clemson Tiger fans, college football fans, welcome back to another episode of the All In Show right here on the Voice of College Football Clemson channel. I'm, as always, your host, Tiger Paul Craven. Thank you so much for joining me. It has been a crazy 24 hours in the world of college football. Everybody knows the news. Nick Saban has hung it up. He's called it quits. He is retiring as the coach of Alabama. Go down as probably the greatest college football coach of all time. It has been absolutely insane. We got a ton to talk about in tonight's show. We'll lead off with that, and then we'll get into some Clemson stuff as well. But if you, before we get into tonight's show, if you are not subscribed to the channel, please go ahead and hit that subscribe button for us. We would really appreciate it. Also, this is a live video, so the likes really help us out. I see we got 15 people in the live chat right now. So if you guys could go ahead and hit that like button for us and help us out. Also, we have the super chat feature available should you want to support the channel in that way. Any and all support is greatly appreciated. Get into the chat, get your comments in here. And as always, me and Jordan will get to them as we go throughout the show, and especially at the end of the show. But let's go ahead and get into tonight's show. Without further ado, let me bring on my co-host, Jordan Bowman. Jordan, man, how's it going, man?
I spent the last 24 hours really trying to gather my thoughts. It's been a pretty crazy day in general, and obviously yesterday was crazy as well. What's funny is I got the news like 2 hours after it dropped, because I had completely I had not touched my phone at work for 2 hours. And I was like, I picked I rarely go that long without checking my phone at least once. But man, I picked a bad time to do it. So when I opened Twitter and I see all of these notifications, my timeline is blowing up, my DMs are blowing up, all these group chats blowing up. I had like a million different messages, and when opening them was one of the most surreal experiences I've ever had, just because the news of Nick Saban's retirement, we all knew it was coming. We knew one day, he was going to hang it up. I mean, it seemed like the guy was there forever, was going to coach forever, but we knew eventually there would come a time where he would do it. But I went into this offseason thinking this wasn't going to be the year. And it's been crazy, man. It's hard to believe. Obviously, the implications of it from a college football standpoint are very obvious. From a Clemson perspective, it was very obvious and what the following questions would be. And throughout the last 24 hours, it's been hard to separate fact and fiction as far as what exactly is happening. But I'm ready to talk about it, because I think I've kind of collected my thoughts. I've put out my instant sort of reactions and stuff out in the social media sphere. But now I'm ready to give a level-headed take about it. So let's get into it.
Yeah, absolutely, man. There's tons to unpack when it comes to, just this crazy news about Nick Saban retiring, right? I mean, you think about the implications that it has for Clemson. We've heard for, probably 10 plus years at this point that as soon as Nick Saban retires, Alabama's coming and plucking Dabo Swinney from the grips of Clemson. That seems to not be the case, but we'll get deeper into that as we talk about it. I just want to start it off with just talking a little bit about Nick Saban, because the guy, love him or hate him, love or hate Alabama, we can all put that aside for a moment and just give Nick Saban his flowers, right? Give him the respect that he's due, because he has truly changed the sport of college football. He has affected it, and his effects will be, long lasting, far after he's gone. He coached at Alabama specifically for 17 seasons, won 6 national titles. Everybody knows the national title that he won with LSU. I think he's got 290 plus victories. I mean, just insane stats that he's got. And, it's just when you think about it, and I text you something similar to this last night when the news broke. I was shocked, honestly. And, when you really step back and think about it logically, you're like, well, it's not that surprising, right? He is 72 years old. Eventually, at some point in time, you got to hang it up. And it's not always the storybook ending. I'm sure he would have loved to, snag one last national title on his way out, but things didn't work out for him this season. But although, I knew for a long time, and all college football fans knew for a long time that this day was eventually coming, he wasn't getting any younger. It's still a shocking thing to hear when it's real and he's announcing it. And there's no hearsay. I know he did an interview with Reese Davis from College Game Day today, kind of breaking down his thought process and why he made the decision. But just talk to me a little bit about Nick Saban and what he's meant to the sport of college football.
Well, I'm gonna make you and some of our viewers feel old, and I guess sort of make me feel old in the process, but more so the viewers. There have only been 7 years in my life, 7 years in my life where Nick Saban was not the head coach of Alabama.
Yeah.
That, when I thought about that, like it really put it into perspective. Just he's been such a fixture of the sport for so long, and he really signified like everything about college football seemed to revolve around his gravitas, his magnitude, whatever you want to call it. Nick Saban was the single most respected person in college athletics, you could argue. And it really is mind blowing to put all of that into perspective and realize that he's no longer there now.
Yeah.
And that's a testament to the career that he's had and just the amount of change and the amount of success that he has seen throughout his years out, especially at Alabama. But man, I just he's the greatest coach of all time. It's at least the greatest college football coach of all time. I don't think there's any dispute. I mean, I know people will talk about Bear Bryant. Nick Saban, 6 national championships in 17 years at Alabama,
17.
and then of course he won a 7th at LSU before that. That's incredible. That's unprecedented. I know Josh Pate put out a stat that like every single player that was recruited by Saban that stayed for 4 years won a national championship.
That's wild.
Yeah, that's pretty wild. And just watching his dominance, experiencing and living through his dominance has been, when it's happening, you're like, oh man, here comes Alabama again. They're gonna run right through everybody. They're gonna be right there in that national championship conversation every single year, and you get tired of it. It's like, man, I want somebody new to win it. But it was kind of like Tom Brady and Bill Belichick with the Patriots. Like he's like, well, I'm so tired of these guys. But then when you take a step back and look at the impact that they had on the sport and the impact that Nick Saban had on the sport, you're like, I got to tip my cap to you. I mean, that's the respect. It's you're appreciating greatness, and I think that's what I've really been able to do in the last 24 hours is just kind of take a step back and realize how great that was and how historic that was, and there probably won't be another run quite like it. And from a Clemson perspective, you will always be able to say, if it wasn't for us, those guys would have 2 more.
Yeah.
And that's pretty incredible. From someone that never expected Clemson to rise to the point that they ended up getting to at all. That's really awesome. And just the the sort of pseudo rivalry that Clemson had with Alabama in those years, that's really going to, stick with me. And, now that it's, Nick Saban has officially moved on, you really get to appreciate it. So that's my little spiel. But it's still, yeah, unbelievable news, shocking news. I was not prepared for that when I opened my phone. That was the last thing I expected to see.
Yeah, certainly the last thing I think most people, if they're being honest, expected to see this offseason. No one ever knew when Nick Saban was going to call it quits, but it didn't feel like it was going to be this offseason. I know there were reports that he was interviewing coaches the day that he announced that he was retiring. He spoke to Reese Davis about how much he struggled with the decision, and ultimately he knew that he couldn't dedicate to the game that what he felt like that his standard was anymore at a consistent basis. So those are the reasons that he stepped down. I know there was rumors out there talking about maybe some health concerns for him or his wife. I'm glad those are not true. I'm glad that's not the case. That didn't affect his decision at all. So that's a good thing. And it seems that he's not going to disappear. He's not going to ride off into the sunset. I listened to the interview of him and Reese Davis, and he talked about wanting to still be involved in college football in some form or fashion. Will that be media? That's possible. That's a possibility. I've seen a lot of people talk about Nick Saban becoming the first commissioner of college football. There's a lot of people out there that think eventually we're going to get to that point where there's a commissioner that's making decisions for the sport. For the good of college football. Obviously, he would be one of the names that would unanimously be respected in that sense. From his experience, his resume, and just the years that he's put in. I don't think anybody would blink twice or have any sort of objections unless you just hate him for what he did to your team and other teams.
Yeah.
For him, taking the reins and steering college football in a better direction than we are currently.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, and that was really, encouraging to hear that he would, stay around the game in some sort of capacity. I kind of had a feeling like there was no way he could just step away and, retire off and, just close himself off from the outside world and just enjoy retirement. That's not what Nick Saban is. Like, that's not his personality, just football. Like, I feel like, if he could, he would coach forever, and just, but the love of the game, a guy that wins at that level and with that kind of consistency, that's a guy that has a almost unhealthy obsession with football.
I'm sure.
Yeah, the drive, it takes a special kind of person to do what he was able to do. And I was like, there's no way he could stay away from the game. So it's really cool to know that he's going to be around, and he's not just going to disappear. He's going to be a voice and a presence, maybe president. That'd be cool.
Maybe.
But a presence within the college football space for the foreseeable future. So that's really cool.
Hey, look, I mean, I would not be sad to see Nick Saban be the president or the commissioner or whatever title they give that person eventually, that I believe is going to happen in college football. I think there's going to be a Roger Goodell type deal in college football where there's a guy that is making the decision. And if it's Nick Saban, I think college football will be in a very good place because I think he does truly care about the sport. And one of the biggest things, I mean, one of the things for me, just looking at Nick Saban's career, is just the consistency at what he performed. I don't believe, history, the future could prove me wrong. But I don't believe we'll ever see anything even remotely close to what Nick Saban did. When you sit back
nowadays,
when you sit back and truly look at what he accomplished, I mean, it's just, you can rattle off stat after stat. You mentioned a couple, eye-popping stats. no player that's played for him for 4 seasons has ever left without a national title. Like, what? That's insane. All the SEC titles that he has, all the national championships that he has at more than one location. I guess the only negative mark on his career, if you want to say it was when he went to the NFL and struggled a bit and realized college is my game. The NFL is not my game. And he quickly came back, took over Alabama, and obviously the rest is history. He's had his foot on the throat of college football for the past, 15 years. And it wasn't a slow turnaround at Alabama. It was year 2.
Yeah.
And he was winning 10 plus games for, the next 14 or 15 years or whatever it ended up being. But, it's just, you have to admire it. We've had some tough games against Alabama as Clemson.
Oh yeah.
Some really tough, heartbreaking ones. That first national championship we played in with Dabo Swinney. That was a heartbreaking game. That was a tough one. But
Never
all of that aside, you have to admire it. Shout out to Coach Saban. I hope he finds a way to continue to help college football as long as he's no longer helping Alabama. So stop helping them. They don't need no help no more. Let them be.
Right. Yeah. Absolutely. I think we certainly wouldn't be upset to see Alabama following this. It certainly doesn't hurt Clemson. But I guess the obvious questions from all of that happening was, from a Clemson standpoint, was, well, it's long been talked about, long been theorized, long been speculated on about Dabo's possible interest in the job if it were ever to come open. Well, it's come open. So I guess like the real questions and the kind of everybody's trying to figure out what's going on. The Alabama head coaching search has been really just the news that has come out. It's been hard to figure out what's real and what isn't, like who they're actually looking at and who they're not. But I think we're starting to get a little bit more clarity within the last, few hours. Not really on a name of who they're going to select, but maybe a shorter list and maybe who is off the table. So it's a really, really difficult thing to kind of parse through. But I don't know. Where are you at on this whole thing? Because I personally don't think I'm gonna say this. I do not think that Dabo Swinney will be the next Alabama head coach.
Right.
Now, that being said, I think that there's two. There's the question of, will he be the Alabama head coach, and does he have interest in the Alabama head coaching job? And I think those are two different questions. Where do you kind of stand? Well, I know where you stand, but you tell the viewers kind of where you stand on that.
Yeah. So if I'm being completely honest, I don't think Dabo Swinney is going to take the Alabama job. One, I don't even know that Alabama has called Dabo Swinney. Alabama runs their program completely differently than the Clemson Tigers run their program and how Dabo Swinney likes to operate. It's no secret that Dabo Swinney marches to the beat of his own drum, right? And Alabama is going after some different style coaches, right? Dabo Swinney is a big believer in recruiting through the high school ranks, developing players, and using the transfer portal for depth. He's not one of these programs that are going to go out there and get 10 to 15 players that half of them are going to start, right? It's just not how he operates. And because of that, I think Alabama fans has made it pretty clear they don't want Dabo Swinney. And guess what? As a Clemson fan, I know they think that's a dig on Clemson. And I know they think like somehow in a weird way that upsets Clemson fans. I couldn't be happier that you don't want to hire Dabo Swinney.
Right.
Yell louder,
Yes.
just in case your administration was thinking about calling Dabo Swinney. Yell a little bit louder so they change their mind and don't call him. Okay, I don't want Dabo Swinney going nowhere, especially to Alabama. That would be devastating because Clemson would for sure take a step back.
Yeah.
And honestly, I don't know that Dabo Swinney would be interested in Alabama. I know all the connections. I know he grew up in Alabama. He played for Alabama. He won a national title there as a as a as a player. He coached under Coach Gene Stallings there in the 90s. I mean, look, he's got tons of history, but he's got just as much, if not more, history at Clemson. And Clemson is a place that he actually built. Logically, in my mind, I can't see him walking away from the place that he literally built to follow a legend like Nick Saban. I'm not saying he'll never go to Alabama, but right now, I don't think so. Maybe later on, after the next guy jacks it up and they fall off, and Bama fans are pulling their hair out and watching NASCAR instead of football, and whatever else they're going to do, right? They're going to be freaking out as soon as Alabama goes 8-4. They'll be jumping off cliffs, right? But for all those reasons, I don't think Dabo Swinney's on the table. Both, and I think it's possibly mutual that Dabo Swinney doesn't want to follow Saban and Alabama doesn't want Dabo Swinney, right? Two things could be true. But what I think could be affected is whoever the coach that gets hired at Alabama, they are going to be looking for some high-level assistant coaches. And I don't think our coaching staff is necessarily safe from that. So my biggest worry is not our head coach, Dabo Swinney. My biggest worry is some of our assistants that are very, very good at what they do and do have aspirations of becoming more than what they are right now as far as their position. Most namely, I know somebody's already put it in the chat up at the beginning. Let me give them credit, whoever put it up in here. Give me 1 second. Who put it in here? I don't see it. Where'd it go?
I'm scrolling too. I must have missed that comment. But
Mike Reed. I'll just go ahead and say I can't find the comment, but Mike Reed. It's no secret that he would love to be a defensive coordinator, and if Alabama came calling and throwing a bunch of money at him to be a defensive coordinator, man, I don't know if Clemson could do enough to hang on to him for a job like that. So those are some of my worries, not necessarily about Dabo Swinney, but more so some of our staff that are very, very good at what they do.
So what's interesting is I think you and I both agree that we don't think Dabo will be the next Alabama head coach. Now, I think where you and I see a little bit differently is I think if Dabo got the call, I'm not saying he definitely would take it, but I think it would be a much more difficult decision than maybe we're making it out to be. I really do think he would consider it hard. And just knowing people don't know this. It was something I hadn't even thought about. But Larry Williams over at Rivals put out an article today about Dabo and kind of his just his love for his history and love for Bama. And he mentioned how Dabo has at both houses he's had at Clemson, he has a giant shrine, like a whole section of his house dedicated to Alabama. And he's taken kids on, that came to his house for recruiting visits there. Like he has a whole section of his house dedicated to his time at Alabama, Bama memorabilia, his pictures of him playing, his jerseys. Like he has, I think we can't understate Dabo's love for the University of Alabama. He loves that school. He has a lot of relationships, history, memories, a lot of sentimental value. Obviously, being a Bama native as well, there's Alabama has been a part of his life pretty much his entire life. So, with that being said, I think it would be a more difficult decision than I think maybe we're making it out to be. Now, I think at the end of the day, and I have no knowledge on this, I would lean towards him staying regardless. I don't think Dabo's going to get the call. So let me just say that. But hypothetically, if he did, I think it would be closer to, I don't know, I'd say like 55-45 that he stays at Clemson. Because I do think the pull of going back home would be very alluring. But Clemson, he's made it very clear that Clemson has been his home as well. And he's been, it's not even just his time as a head coach. He's been employed by Clemson University for 21 years. 21 years of his life he's dedicated to this football program as a assistant and as a head coach. I mean, you can't overstate that. That is a lot of time. I've I'm a pretty young guy, but I know how long 21 years is, and I've been at least alive that long. That is a long time. So while I do think that I do think that Alabama will eventually find their head coach, and I do not think it will be Dabo Swinney. I do think if he did get that call, it would be a very difficult decision. And so my hope is he doesn't get that call. Right. I don't think he will, but my hope is he doesn't, for obvious reasons, because despite what maybe some people think, even with the dip, so to speak, of Clemson over the last few years, Dabo Swinney leaving Clemson football, there's no good that comes from that. I mean, obviously, greatest head coach in your school's history, maybe the greatest single figure in your entire athletic program. Like I don't think it'd be overstated how much Dabo has brought to Clemson University as a university. Losing him would be all of that and more that you're missing out on. And obviously, as Clemson fans, we have a ton of sentimental and love and respect for what Dabo Swinney has been for this school and this football program. So, I think Dabo. I think the best thing for Clemson football is Dabo Swinney being in Clemson, and that's all there is to it. And I would probably. I'm not a guy that cries a lot. But the day that Dabo Swinney leaves Clemson football, in whatever capacity, will be a day that I shed tears.
Yeah, absolutely, man.
He's been here for so long. So he's been such a part of my life and my sports fandom and Clemson fandom in particular. It's been almost inseparable. So I couldn't even imagine. I'm not ready for that day.
That's the thing about it is, look, I know frustrations have definitely boiled over a few times in the last couple of years, but make no mistake about it. Much of what Nick Saban is to Alabama is what Dabo Swinney is to Clemson. Now, I'm not comparing their career in any way, shape, or form. So nobody start freaking out in the comment section and pretending like I'm comparing Dabo Swinney to Nick Saban. I'm just saying what he's done for Clemson football from where we were it has similarities to what he has built there with the football facilities, with all the new sports, with all the new academic buildings being built there, the money being pumped into the school, the community, the program because of the success that he's had on the football field. I don't think any serious Clemson fan wants Dabo Swinney to leave. And if they do, I'd love to hear their reasoning why and who's going to do better than Dabo Sweeney has at Clemson. Now, does that mean he's infallible and we can't question some of his decisions? Absolutely not.
Right.
But I don't want
I don't want him.
excuse me. I don't want him going anywhere.
I'm
You
not
know,
ready.
I'll continue to gripe and moan when necessary. But that doesn't mean I want him to go anywhere. And as far as who replaces Nick Saban, I don't know. I really thought it was going to be Dan Lanning. I'm not going to lie. I thought that was a done deal. I was looking up stuff last night, and there was news outlets reporting that Dan Lanning was in Tuscaloosa. I don't know if he was really in Tuscaloosa or not. Whether he was or whether he wasn't doesn't really matter because he came out and said in a very emphatic fashion today that I'm not going anywhere. I'm the coach at Oregon. I'm not going to Alabama. So he's continuing to turn down jobs to stay at Oregon. Obviously, Oregon is somewhere that he wants to be. Obviously, somewhere where his family is comfortable and they want to be. So, good on him. But I really thought Dan Lanning, we can go name all the big names that have been named. Steve Sarkisian, I don't think he's going to leave Texas and go back to Alabama. Steve Sarkisian's got a great thing going in Texas. They're going into the SEC. They're coming fresh off of a college football playoff appearance. They'll be back probably in the college football playoffs next year with the 12-team playoff. So I don't really see that happening. I know I've heard Mike Norvell. I've heard James Franklin. I've heard Jim Harbaugh. You've heard all the names out there. Who they're really targeting and going after, I really don't know at this point because I really thought it was Dan Lanning. I expected to hear at some point in time today Dan Lanning be announced as Alabama's new head coach. That's the direction I thought it was going. Clearly, I was way off and way wrong. So were a lot of people on the internet. So Here we are again, back to square one. I honestly have no clue. Lane Kiffin has been another big name mentioned. I don't know that Lane Kiffin really fits Alabama. That feels like a weird transition. You go from a buttoned up, fierce competitor, they're polar opposites. Nick Saban and Lane Kiffin. You couldn't get any further from two styles of coaches, two styles of just people in general. So that feels like a weird transition. So I don't know about that either. In a long, convoluted way, I don't know. I don't know where Alabama's going as far as their coaching search. What do you think?
Yeah, it's been so hard to parse through all of that because there's just been so many names thrown out there. And, I think the part of what's made it difficult is the fact that, reportedly Bama is looking to have this finalized within the next 72 hours, which means everybody outside of that is in a rush to throw names out there and connect the dots here and flight tracking this. This flight is scheduled from Eugene to Tuscaloosa and this flight is scheduled from, like, it's been so crazy just kind of following just the media in general as far as like this entire coaching search. At this point, I don't really know. My name is a name you mentioned, and I think a couple of people have already mentioned in the chat. I think it could be Mike Norvell. I really do.
Talk about that irony, dude. Talk about that irony.
What's funny is his Vegas odds when it was announced that Dan Lanning was not going to leave Oregon, they shot up to like number 2 behind Lane Kiffin or whatever. I don't even remember who's first at this point. Or I think it was Dan Lanning, and I guess that's dropped. So I don't know what it is now, but that would be interesting because Mike Norvell is a guy that has limited experience at the Power 5 level. He was a great, he had great success at Memphis. He didn't build that program up, but he sustained, what they had going there. And then obviously he goes to Florida State, who was a dumpster fire when he got there. It took a couple of years, but they gave him time, and eventually he flipped that roster. And then obviously we saw they went 13-1. Orange Bowl notwithstanding, they had a great year, and obviously the college football playoff snub and all that, but still a great year regardless. And I think he's a guy that, honestly, I think it would be a good hire for Alabama. I know he doesn't have the history, the pedigree quite in that, or and the recruiting acumen that's obviously no one's going to have what Saban had, but even what some of the other candidates that are being mentioned along with him would have. But he is a really, really good talent evaluator, which I think Bama's going to need because they're going to lose a lot of players. They're going to need a guy that's going to be able to utilize the portal effectively, something that Norvell has shown he's been really, really good at, and a guy that has a offensive system and a history of developing quarterbacks. And I think what he did with Jordan Travis was pretty commendable. I got to give him credit. Jordan Travis was not a good he was not a good quarterback when Norvell got there, and by the end of his career, I think he was a very good college quarterback. And he had a lot of limitations, but even he was a great athlete, but obviously the throwing part wasn't great. But he steadily got better each and every single year. And I thought, obviously by his final year, I thought he was he had become a pretty good passer. So I think it could be Norvell, personally. And I think it would make a lot of sense. I think it would be obviously it would be a good thing for Clemson, because I think Florida State has built some momentum this past year. And it would force them to kind of go through another search. And, unless they landed somebody I'm not thinking of or somebody unprecedented, I think whoever they would get might be a step down. So honestly, I think it could be Norvell. I just that would not shock me. And obviously, Kalen DeBoer is a guy that's also been mentioned. I think that's very likely as well. And those are two guys that that have had success everywhere they've been. Brilliant offensive minds that have had success at the quarterback position. I think those would be two good hires for Bama, despite those two guys not really having the maybe recruiting ties to the state and obviously, but it's Alabama. You're going to be, anybody that takes that job is going to have a baseline level of where they'll be able to recruit. Like it's really hard to not be able to recruit to Alabama. And I know, Nick Saban did it, at an elite level, but there hasn't been a coach, really since, Alabama was under probation that really struggled recruiting to Alabama. Right. Obviously, you have to have the other things in place to be a successful program, but recruiting and talent has hardly ever been an issue at Alabama. So I think those would make sense. You could get guys in there.
Yeah, and then you could hire guys that are, a better recruiter than you as far as high school talent goes. And like you said, that Alabama name goes a long way. Much easier to recruit at Alabama than virtually anywhere else, outside of a few other programs. But, that makes a lot of sense. I could see Norvell going there. Man, talk about the irony of that, man. Norvell has an undefeated season at Florida State, gets left out of the playoffs for Alabama, only for him to get blown out by Georgia in the bowl game and then go be the coach for Alabama after Nick Saban retires.
I would bet pay good money to see the Florida State reactions.
Bro, if I was a Florida State fan, I'd be fighting the air at that point. Like I might have to walk away from if I was him, I might have to walk away from football for like 3 days. Like I'm just gonna turn my computer off. I'm gonna turn my phone off. Not going on social media. I'm done. You know what? Forget you people. We had an undefeated season, and it couldn't have ended worse.
Probably the worst month in Florida State football history would be that between the snub and then all the way up to your head coach leaving you right after the Orange Bowl, and then your head coach leaving right after that would be, you hate to see it.
So look, they might crumble, man. They might fall apart. I don't know what Florida State will do.
You see it. We're going to get – I know there are Florida State – there might be Florida State fans watching, but
I'm not wishing it on them. I'm just saying if that happens, oh, my goodness. Like, talk about, like, if I would have thought worst case scenario prior to the ACC championship game of how Florida State's season would have ended, I would have never written it like that. I mean,
No,
that's absolutely insane.
absolutely
But
not.
Norvell's, he's a formidable coach. He's definitely going to be an option. I think if Alabama offers him, I think he goes. I don't think you turn that job down.
No.
In the position he's in right now, I don't think he would turn it down. That's just my opinion. Again, I don't know Norvell. Never talked to him. Don't know very much about him, but I think he accepts the job. Same thing with our guy out there in Washington. I
Yeah,
think
Kalen DeBoer, yeah.
Kellen DeBoer. I think if they offered him, he takes the job as well. You just don't pass up a place like Alabama when you're the coach at Washington. It's just you just don't. It's a far better job, far better resources, far better talent. And yes, no coach that goes there is going to be Nick Saban. They are not going to do what Nick Saban did. I think we've made that pretty clear throughout our show tonight. But they won't be devoid of talent. I don't care how many players transfer from there; they're still going to have a buttload of talent on that roster, and they'll be just fine. They've stacked top 2, top 3 class for the last forever on that roster. So I don't think talent will be an issue at all, even if they have sort of an exodus when it comes to the transfer portal. I know they already had one decommit in their 5-star wide receiver. Probably more to come, I would assume. And we'll see how that affects Alabama. Again, this is going to send shockwaves throughout the sport because whoever Alabama hires, that's going to be a team that now is without a coach, and you can just see the ripple effect from there.
Yep.
With other people, poaching other people from other staff, so then they're going to be looking for coach. I mean, this is going to create quite a bit of news stories and just craziness in the college football world for the next probably month or so until it calms back down and all the coaching situations are handled and we're into spring practice and stuff like that. But again, I'll be interested to see who Alabama gets. I wouldn't want to be the guy following up Nick Saban, the greatest college football coach of all time, and it's not even close. I would not want to be the guy. And I was listening to his interview with Reese Davis a little bit, and I found this interesting. They're going to have an office for him right there. I don't know that I'd want Nick Saban that close if I'm following him up in the Alabama program. I'd want him maybe as a resource that I could call and get advice from. But being in the building, it seems like a different story. I don't know. I think it would feel weird if I'm the new coach coming in trying to do it kind of my way, and he's kind of still there. That's just my opinion.
And the following Nick Saban thing, it kind of reminds me. It reminds me of that Key and Peele sketch. The guy that followed Martin Luther King's "I Have a Dream" speech.
It's like, man, why do I
if you haven't watched that, go watch. Man, Key and Peele, they were ahead of their time. I love that show. Yeah. But that skit always, like whenever I think about the guy that follows the guy, like I think of that skit. It's so funny. Yeah. You're just like, because what do you do? Like, how do you? There's no way to measure up like that. But so that was, that's kind of how I think of it, and it's, it takes a special kind of person to want to do that, but. Maybe that's the guy that wants to follow Nick Saban might be he might be the right guy, because you have to be made of the right stuff to take that job, knowing the shoes you're stepping in. So we'll see. I'm anxious. I've never been this anxious about a head coaching search, and it's not just because it's not even from a Clemson Dabo standpoint. It's Alabama. This job hasn't been open for ages. I can't remember when it was. I don't remember when. Barely. And I didn't follow college football that closely enough to, be in tune with all the head coaches moving this. Like when Rich Rod was about to be hired. Like I don't remember any of that. So like this is new to me. The Alabama job it felt like I was, oh man, it's Nick Saban. He's there. That job's not coming up in anytime soon. But now that day has come. Yeah, and so obviously it's one of the top jobs in the sport. So it's going to send whoever they hire. It's going to, like you said, it's going to send ripple effects across college football as a whole. So it's crazy. So I'm on like pins and needles right now, just because it's going to be intriguing who they hire, no matter who it is. It's going to generate conversation. It's going to be wild. So just kind of excited to see where, who ends up being announced.
Yeah, it's going to be, like you said, it's going to be absolutely insane. There's going to be ripple effects. I can't wait to watch it. Hopefully it doesn't affect the Clemson Tigers. Yeah. Mark gets in here. I remember about 10 Bama coaching changes. I'm old.
Well, when you put it in the perspective of, obviously the time between now and the last Bama coaching search was a really long time, but before that, they were going through coaches at a pretty high rate. So you're not that old, Mark. You're not that old. They just
John said, Jordan's in here age shaming us. I agree with you, John.
I'm sorry.
Jordan keeps rubbing our noses in how young he is. Yeah. Get him, John. Get him. Tell him to stop making us feel old.
I'm not trying to.
Alexander gets in with a $10 super chat. Thank you so much for supporting the channel, Alexander. Really appreciate it. Saban coach teams have played in 9 natties, 1 with LSU and 8 with Alabama. But only 2 losses in those 9 championship games are to Dabo. I would be shocked if Dabo does not get offered the job.
3, because Kirby Smart, but
Kirby
Smart did beat him in 2021. So,
right.
But point still stands. I mean, Dabo's the only he's the only person to beat Saban multiple times in national championship games, and Dabo is also the only person to have a winning record against Saban in national championship games.
Mm-hmm.
So and obviously Dabo will hold the record forever of giving Nick Saban his worst loss at Alabama. So that's there's a lot of impressive stats you can come from that. But thank you for the $10. He said, I would be shocked if Dabo does not get offered the job. I wouldn't. And I think the reasons are obvious, because, and we talked about them, the way Alabama wants to run their program is not necessarily completely in tune with how Dabo has run his program at Clemson. And obviously the last few years, you can't argue that his stock is, hasn't dropped. It's certainly dropped because of Clemson struggles. But
the national narrative on Dabo Swinney has vastly shifted from that last national championship to where we sit now. That 2018 national championship run, his stock was peak.
Yeah, they were like, everyone thought it was like, it's only it's not a matter of if, it's when, Dabo eventually.
And that's when all the noise was, as soon as Saban retires, hey, Clemson can kiss Dabo Swinney goodbye because he's leaving, right? That's when all those talks. But the national narrative on Dabo Swinney has shifted so much over the past 3 seasons. Some of it deserved, some of it I think undeserved. But again, it doesn't matter. The narrative has shifted. So do they offer him? No, I don't think they have. Will they? I don't know. I guess that depends on if people keep telling them no. Clearly Dan Lanning told him no. I know there'll never be anything official that comes out about, we offered him the job or we didn't offer him the job, whatever the case may be. I feel pretty certain that they offered Dan Lanning the job. He declined.
Yeah, the fact that he felt the need to make an announcement means, they were in serious talks with him. But I think Dabo he's on the list, certainly. Like they're certainly a guy that is he's certainly a guy that's been under consideration. From what has been reported and what we know right now, he has not been in any contact with Alabama since the news came out. So that doesn't mean that he won't eventually, be in contact. We don't know. But all we know right now is that Dabo has not been contacted by Alabama yet. So
keep it that way. Keep it that way, Alabama.
I would very much prefer it stay that way.
I'm going to need all the Alabama fans to go up to the athletic director's office, wherever it is.
Go protest, do that whole chant.
Protest. Do the chant, get picket signs. Yeah, get picket signs, refuse to go to class, do anything you got to do. Tell them anybody but Dabo. I like it. Keep that thing trending on Twitter. That's
You know,
exactly what we need.
what's funny is and it's funny because when I saw that, I was like, well, anyone. I think people don't when people say anyone, I don't think people realize what the word anyone means. Like okay, you can say anyone but Dabo. It's fine with me,
you,
but be
you
careful
know,
what you wish for.
that's
You could
what
do a
that's what
lot worse.
that's what I'm saying. You can do a lot worse than Dabo Sweeney, but I'm glad they don't want him. I saw
Yeah.
somebody tweet something wild on Twitter, and it was like, I can name 100 coaches that be on my list before Dabo Sweeney. I was like, 100 coaches, really?
Okay. All right.
That's a bold. 100 coaches. You say, okay, well, I mean, I'll take your word for it, but I can't name 100 coaches.
No,
So
I can't name 5. So
that whatever, man.
I'm
Hey,
biased. I'm
I
biased.
don't care. I don't care. I'm glad they don't want him. I hope they don't even call him. That way, he doesn't even have to make the decision. I hope there's no decision to be made. But you know, uh, I guess good luck to Alabama in their coaching search. Not really. You don't need any good luck. You've had plenty of luck over the last 17 years.
Right.
It's time. It's time for you to maybe have some mediocre luck. Okay. So
That would be nice. That would be nice. All right.
all right, let's go. Yeah, let's go ahead and transition to our boy TJ Moore. You know, this guy, I don't know. I know we talked a little bit about it last week in the last week's show, but we talked about it before the show today, and we kind of wanted to highlight TJ Moore a little bit more, just about his performance and what he did in that All-Star game, going over 100 yards, two touchdowns, and more importantly, not just the yards and the touchdowns. I think, but he was truly a safety blanket for his quarterback in that game, and some of those catches, man. You go back and watch them, and in a Clemson wide receiver room that has been devoid of a wide receiver that can go and take over a game, I saw him go take over an all-star game, and kind of be the guy that the quarterback was looking to, and he made some unbelievable catches. That one-handed catch on the sideline, I think it was his first catch of the game, and then his second touchdown in the front corner of the end zone, where he just caught the ball out in front with his hands and held it away from his body so that the cornerback couldn't knock it out of his hands. I mean, you see stuff like that, and it's those flashes that you're like, man, I cannot wait until this dude puts that helmet on with the tiger paw on the side and runs out on the field for these Clemson Tigers. Because let me tell you, we need TJ Moore, and I can't be more excited that we have him coming this summer.
Yeah, it was pretty unbelievable. And yeah, we talked about sort of his performance during the All-American Bowl practices and stuff. But the game was on Saturday, so I wanted to talk about it for a brief moment because it really was special, and he probably should have had more. If we're being honest, I think 11 catches, 180 yards, 2 touchdowns. That's insane. In an All-Star game, an All-American Bowl where you're pitted against and playing with some of the best players at your position in the country, and he was the best guy out there, and he was open. It seemed like he was open every play. Like there were times watching that game where I was like, it's like TJ's right there. He's gonna make that play. Throw it, and he would the quarterback would go somewhere else. But man, was he special. That was that was a really exciting thing to see. Some of those catches he was making. And he impressed the scouts too. I mentioned, last week how Rivals only had him as the 41st ranked receiver. I expect that to change pretty soon when they do their rankings updates. Hopefully, I would love to see him get a 5th star, but from what I've seen, they said a 5th star is probably not likely, but they'll get him he'll get a significant bump. So what that looks like, I don't know. But man, he was really, really good on Saturday. So that was exciting. And yeah, I think he's a guy that's he's one of those guys that just comes in ready to play because he the speed, the measurables. He has it all there. Really good catch. Really great hands, great route runner. I just there's not a whole lot of things that when you watch him, you're like, yeah, he looks like a pretty complete receiver.
Mm-hmm.
And so he's going to be a good one. I feel pretty confident in that. So just wanted to give TJ a shout out. That was, closing out that his stellar practices with an even more stellar All-American Bowl game. And I think he won. I don't think he won MVP because his team didn't win, but he won MVP for the losing team. I can't remember how exactly they did those awards, but I know he got a belt or something like that because I saw him post a picture of it.
Yeah.
So that was really cool. But yeah, and not to mention he had the number one player in the country in Jeremiah Smith on his team as well. So I forgot to mention that when I said you have the best players in the country at your position, you're playing with and against, like he literally was. Jeremiah Smith is the number one overall player in the 2024 class, regardless of position, and TJ was the one that had the big performance. Jeremiah played well too, but man, TJ he put on a performance.
He had a monster day, man, and as a Clemson fan, it's a sight for sore eyes, man. When you see a receiver out there just take over, I mean, that's what he did. He took over. The quarterback kept looking his way, and he just kept making plays. He kept getting open. He kept making contested catches. His hands are really strong. He's a good hand catcher. Excited to see him come to Clemson. We definitely need him. It's going to be a really good kind of blast of energy and just kind of a different style guy in that wide receiver room that badly needs it. And then we got Brian Wesco coming with him, so we're looking pretty good as far as those two guys. I know we only landed two, but we landed two really good ones, and he couldn't have had a better day in the All-Star game.
Absolutely, man. So shout out to TJ. Can't wait to see him get here. Obviously, he'll be a summer guy, so won't get to really hear anything about him in the spring. But still, I think he's a guy that can come in and work his way in that depth chart early, just because of he really does. I mean, when I watch him play, he's a 5-star talent to me. Like I give him. I know my opinion and 2 cents doesn't carry that much weight, but I think he's a 5-star receiver. Obviously we have an actual 5-star receiver coming along with him in Bryant Wesco. So it's going to be, I think those two. And obviously I'm really high on Wesco as well. So I'm really excited to get these guys on campus.
Man. Excited to see Wesco come in the spring. So we'll get to see him a little bit early.
Yep.
TJ Moore won't come till the summer, so we got to wait a little bit on him. But if history repeats itself, TJ Moore's in for a monster season because the past 2 years, our leading receivers have been freshman summer enrollees.
Yep.
So if that pattern holds true, TJ Moore's in for a big season, and I think he'll definitely get a ton of playing time, even if he's not the leading receiver at the end of the season. But let's go ahead and shift gears to kind of our last thing we're going to talk about before we switch it over to the comment section. And what we wanted to do was just kind of talk about, as we're getting closer to spring and entering the offseason, some big key places where Clemson needs to improve, or some important people heading into the offseason, whether it be coaches or players that need to develop, or whatever the case may be. Just big key things to just kind of start our conversation into the offseason and into spring of what needs to improve. So we came up with a little list of things. First and foremost, for me, I think I'll give one of mine, and that's Matt Luke. I think probably the most important hire that Dabo Swinney made this offseason was Matt Luke. Not taking anything away from Chris Rump at defensive end, but I truly believe that is the key for this Clemson offense in 2024. If Matt Luke can get this offensive line sorted out, get these guys in the positions where they can excel, you're going to see a very different offense in 2024. And if he can't, if they're not producing on the field, you will see something that's eerily similar to the offense that you saw in 2023 from Clemson. It's such a big deal, and we're losing Will Putnam at center. So obviously we got to replace him. You would think it'd be Ryan Lithicum, maybe Harris Sewell pushing into center. But you do have some talent there and some starters coming back who played a lot of snaps. People that were hurt, and Walker Parks that's coming back, and it's going to play his last season at Clemson. And really, Matt Luke he's got to be the guy. He's developed so many elite offensive lines throughout his career, and we really need that at Clemson. Me and you have talked at length on this channel about the lack of, just the poor offensive line and the inconsistent offensive line play, not only in 2023, but just historically for Clemson. It's never been a true strong suit for us. And I think Matt Luke could be the guy to change that. We have plenty of talent in the room. He's got to develop these guys. If you saw Clemson towards the end of the season, we started playing a lot better. But if you notice, we went back to that zone blocking scheme that we used to run before, we hired Garrett Riley, right? Because the offensive line couldn't perform and do what Garrett Riley was asking them to do. So now it's on Matt Luke to develop those guys and get them in a place where they can do what Garrett Riley is asking them to do, so that we can see an offense closer to what we expected when Garrett Riley was hired by Dabo Swinney last offseason. So for me, that's my that's my number one is Matt Luke and the offensive line.
I'm with you. I didn't really I made a list, didn't really have them in any particular order, but Matt Luke is right at the top for me as well, and for all the reasons you listed. I think my number one guy, though, I think the number one player that determines everything about Clemson's prospects in 2024. I think it's kind of obvious, but I think it's Cade Klubnik. I think Cade Klubnik is the single most important person in this offseason for Clemson. I think we saw in 2023, I think we saw flashes and glimpses in every so often of what Cade Klubnik brings to the table from a skill set standpoint. But along with that, you got a lot of inexperience, a lot of mistakes, a lot of missed reads, poor decision making. I think his development is the single most important thing about this offseason for this entire team. Because while I think the offensive line had a lot of issues last year, I guess we can officially say last year. That's still
it's weird.
It still feels weird, but maybe I should wait a little bit longer because it still kind of feels like we're kind of in the 2023 season. But you get what I'm saying. While the offensive line did have a lot of problems this year, I think there were a lot of things that, independent of the offensive line play, that Cade Klubnik simply just has to get better at. And I think there are games that Clemson lost this year that were winnable, obviously. And, I think part of, what cost Clemson in some of these games was the inexperience of Cade. And he brought in Garrett Riley to develop him and all of that. And I think Cade has to make that step on his own as well. And so I think his development is, will tell us everything we need to know about what Clemson's prospects are for 2024, because I think everything else is a non-starter if Cade doesn't take a leap next year. So he's number one for me, first and foremost.
Yeah, absolutely. I completely agree with that. Cade Klubnik's going to be huge. I'll switch gears to the other side of the ball, and I'm going to go linebacker position. Wade Woodaz. I think he is going to be pivotal in this defense. I know what I'm going to get out of Barrett Carter. Now, obviously, Barrett Carter's got some stuff that he needs to improve as well. But for me, starting opposite, taking over the position of a Jeremiah Trotter is going to be huge shoes to fill. You saw how dominant Jeremiah Trotter was on this defense for the entire second half of the season, essentially. He was just dominant. He was in on every play. He was disruptive, just absolutely, a nuisance to these offenses that we were playing. And that's going to be a big hole that Clemson has to fill. And when Wes Goodwin's going to have to figure it out. Wade Woodaz seems to be the guy that's going to step up and probably get the most snaps. But you got other guys like Kobe McLeod and other guys that you've seen get in, young guys that you look to develop and probably will get some playing time. I know we got Sammy Brown coming in, one of the best, if not the best linebacker in the country coming in. He's probably going to get some snaps, but again, there's a lot to learn at the linebacking position. And Clemson's linebackers are asked to do a lot of things, and that's going to be a steep learning curve for even a guy as talented and as versatile as Sammy Brown is. There's going to be somewhat of a learning curve, so you cannot expect him to come in here and immediately play starting snaps. I'm not saying he won't get on the field. I absolutely think he will, and I'm sure his role will grow as the season goes on. But for me, it's those couple guys that are probably going to be rotating and replacing a Jeremiah Trotter.
Yeah, absolutely. Linebacker is going to be huge because you don't have a lot of depth on there. I didn't have Wade Woodaz on my top 5, but I think that's a good pick because he's going to be stepping into a bigger role. I thought he had a really good bowl game, and obviously he was very consistent this year. So he's going to have to take that next step, and obviously, having Barrett Carter back and the guys behind him. I mean, really, Barrett Carter and Wade Woodaz they're going to be the guys that the younger guys are looking to because they're the leaders, they're the starters, and so it's ultra important for them for this defense's success next year. My number 2 was actually Matt Luke as well. So I had Cade number 1 and Matt Luke number 2, but for all the reasons you said. Obviously the development of the offensive line is second to for me is second to Cade and Cade only. So they absolutely need to get better. I'll go ahead and skip. I don't want to go on a long thing about Matt Luke because we basically covered it. So my number 3 guy is actually, this one might surprise you, is Adam Randall. I've been I've had a very mixed, I guess, I don't know if mixed is the right word, but a very up and down opinion or feeling on Adam Randall. But I think I saw some things in the latter half of the season that gave me reason to believe that he was starting to find his groove and starting to find his place in the offense. And Clemson not having a true outside number 1 receiver, especially with Bo Collins, leaving, there has to be a guy that steps. There has to be a guy that steps up there. I know we just got done raving about Bryant Wesco and TJ Moore and how good those guys are going to be, but I would rather not have them come in being expected to be that guy right away. I think it would be awesome if Adam Randall became that guy that Clemson brought him in to be. And so for the sake of this wide receiver room that I think is better than maybe people are giving it credit for, and actually I think Tyler Grisham has started to figure some things out with these guys. I think what they truly need is a true number 1 outside receiver because Clemson didn't really have that this year. At times, Tyler Brown was the number 1 guy, and obviously from a yardage standpoint, he was. And then other times, when Bo Collins was healthy, you saw him, play well at times. And Troy Stellato and obviously you didn't have Antonio Williams and Cole Turner, who were guys you were expected to rely on more this year. But you never truly had that number one guy at receiver, and you relied on Jake Brittingstool more in certain games, but you didn't have that number one pass catching option. And I think if Adam Randall can be the guy that Clemson needs him to be, I think it makes it easier for everybody else in that room, because Adam Randall he has all the tools to be an elite receiver. Like,
Yep.
The size, the speed, the athleticism, the physical traits that he has they're God given. Like, you don't teach that. You can't teach that. And so I think he has to make that. He needs to make that step. I think he absolutely needs to, because I can't feel good, as much as I love Bryant Wesco and TJ Moore. I can't feel good about saying, oh, well, even if Adam Randall isn't good, these guys are going to come in and just be him right away. Like, maybe
Right.
they do. That would be great. But I would rather, have the reassurance of knowing that, Adam Randall, of Adam Randall being that guy, and we can let TJ Moore and Bryant Wesco kind of find their role and just grow with the offense, instead of coming in and needing to be big time contributors, because we don't have a true number one guy.
Mm-hmm.
So I went with Adam Randall. I think he's primed. This is his first offseason really of him going in healthy, as far as I know. And I think that's huge for him. That's huge for him. So I want to see what progress he makes in the spring, and whether he finds himself and finds his confidence again, because I think some of it is mental, to the point where he can be that guy. Because I think Cade, it would be great for Cade, this offense, what Garrett Riley can do schematically, all of that.
Yeah, absolutely, man. I didn't really have him on my list, but that's a great pick. Not something that I thought about, but a really good pick. And I agree with all your points. It makes a ton of sense, and we really do need that veteran guy, and we need that big guy on the outside, man. That's really what this Clemson offense has been missing for 3 years now. There's not been an alpha dog on the outside that's that big bodied wide receiver with speed, that can just go up and get the ball and make a play when you need a play made. You need that guy, and you made all the points of why Adam Randall can be that guy. And I think a lot of it, like you said, is mental. I think it's a lot to do with mental, and maybe that's attributed to some of his injuries. It's really easy, I think, as an athlete to get injured, and then you kind of don't trust things, and then you get in a rut, and then you get kind of buried on the depth chart a little bit, and you just get into a bad headspace. So hopefully he can parlay the game that he had against Kentucky into a really good spring, because he played really well against Kentucky.
Yeah.
It looked like he was becoming really comfortable out there, and really trusting himself, and trusting the offense, and just playing within the offense. So hopefully he can parlay that. I would love to see Adam Randall out there balling next year. But I'm gonna go ahead and shift to the other side of the ball, and I'm gonna go Avion Terrell. I think he is going to be a pivotal part for this defense next year. Obviously, people know we are losing Nate Wiggins, our lockdown corner, just the guy on the outside. And those are big shoes to fill, but somebody's got to fill them. And we've seen flashes from Avion Terrell this season. Obviously, we know the pedigree that he comes from with AJ Terrell, and what that name means in a Clemson uniform. And I look for big things for him next season. He's got to be a guy out there next season, because he's going to be asked to be in coverage by himself a lot. And he's going to have to go out there and perform. And he's got some areas to get better in, right? He had some good flashes in his freshman campaign, but again, when you're the guy out there taking every single snap of every single game, like a Nate Wiggins did, right? It's a lot different standard than just coming in and playing in spurts, and playing free and playing loose, because you're not the guy that everybody's looking to. And some of that dynamic is going to change this season for him. So I look for him to, he's really going to have to focus up in this offseason, and get right, and just continue to build his consistency, continue to approach the game in the right way, because we're going to need him in a bad way next year.
Absolutely, and he's a guy I didn't put like you with Adam Randall. I didn't even put Avion Terrell on my list either, but that's a really good pick as well. You got it. He's got to be that guy now. Clemson is going to be young at corner. Obviously we're really high on these guys, but at the end of the day, they're true sophomores, and now they don't have the safety blanket and the experience of Nate Wiggins and even Sheridan Jones. Just the leadership and experience that those two guys had. You don't have that anymore. So you're gonna have to step in, and you're gonna have to be the guy for the younger corners, and obviously you still have got Jaden Lucas in the room as well, but hopefully he comes back and can be a huge piece and finally and really have that third year jump that I'm hoping he does, and hopefully he stays healthy because that's been his biggest thing. But Avion Terrell has clearly he's separated himself. It seems like, and he has the. Honestly, he's farther along now as going to be a true sophomore than his brother was. Honestly, by a good bit. So that's really cool and exciting. So, but yeah, he's going to have a big offseason and take that next step as well. But played really, really well as a true freshman. Expect great things from him in 2024. So that's a good pick. My number 4 guy is a coach. I'm going with Garrett Riley. And just for all the reasons that I talked about with Cade and his development, but this offense in general, because at the end of the day, he brought him in to bring the exciting, the fun back into the Clemson offense. And most of this year was anything but fun. Now, I grant him those, the personnel limitations and all of that. But at the end of the day, you're going to want to start to see results this year, and you're going to want to see that that step taken. You want to see Cade, develop. You want to see, your running game and your passing game be complementary parts of the offense, and you want to be explosive in the passing game, because that's really the biggest thing. Clemson has been abysmal in explosive plays for the last 3 years. Abysmal. So that's what you brought him. That's what you brought him in to do. So he's going to have to have a big off season, because I think this year is, got to start seeing something, because we're paying. You're one of the highest paid coordinators in all of football right now.
Yep.
So you figure it out. You can't keep, for the first year, obviously we understand why things didn't go the way you wanted it to, but
right.
This year you got to start, you got to take what didn't work in 2023 and make sure that doesn't happen again. So he has to have a big season. Obviously. So Garrett Riley is my number 4.
Absolutely. Great pick. Absolutely great pick. It's got to be Garrett Riley. Look, the guy has got, like you said, I don't think it could have been said any better. He's got to figure it out. At the end of the day, he's got to figure it out. He's got to work with what he's got, adjust his offense, his play calling to the personnel, and figure out what works. That's what makes good coaches great. Their ability to alter their system in a way that maximizes their personnel. He's got to figure out how to do it, because at times it looked painful, clunky, difficult. Nothing ever looks easy for Clemson's offense. In the past 3 years, basically, Clemson's offense has just looked like they're running in mud, basically. Hard to watch at times. It had flashes in moments this season, so I know it's there. I know Garrett Riley's capable of it, but I think that's a really good pick. He's definitely got to develop into, a better play caller. He's got to develop into a better offensive coordinator, and that's going to be on him this offseason. And I think he knows that. He's not satisfied with what he did on the field as far as coaching this season. I have no doubts about it. A guy like that is not satisfied with it. So I'm actually going to go with another coach, and it's less about the coach because I think he's a really good one. He's actually our other new hire in Chris Rumpf. It's more about his position group and the lack of depth that's there, at least depth that has played significant snaps in a Clemson uniform in a college game. The defensive end position is pretty thin, man. It's pretty thin. You get a
Yeah.
guy in XT that walks out the door. You get a guy in Justin Maskell that walks out the door. Really, all you got of significance left is TJ Parker, who, mind you, was a true freshman last year that came out of nowhere. And thank God that he did, because if he didn't, I don't know what the end position would have looked like on some of those games for the Clemson Tigers.
Right.
Because XT had, was banged up. Justin Maskell got banged up. So TJ Parker was the one guy that was out there pretty much every game and performing at an extremely high level. So he needs to maintain what he's doing, take that next step in the offseason. But Chris Rumpf has to identify the guys that can truly play meaningful snaps for this Clemson team. Who that is, honestly, at this point, I don't know. I can't name a specific player. I like what I saw from Denhoff in the bowl game against Kentucky. I thought he played probably his best game as a Clemson Tiger. So maybe he's that guy. I don't know, again, but it's on Chris Rumpf. He's got to, he came out and said he loves the talent that's in the room. He's going to go with it. Obviously, they didn't, strongly pursue transfer portal guys. So to me, that tells me that Chris Rumpf said, hey, I'm good with the players that I got. Okay, if that's the case, now you have to develop those players, and they're going to have to play meaningful snaps, and it's going to be guys that have never played meaningful snaps for the Clemson Tigers. So that's just, I believe that he's capable of it. I believe that he will produce a defensive line that a defensive end group that is formidable. But I mean, it's hard to see Clemson's defensive ends where they are at this point. I mean, you think back throughout Clemson's playoff run and how dominant our defensive ends were. I mean, we were just rolling guys in over and over again. I mean, just guy after guy after guy after guy. I mean, people, players were running to Clemson to play defensive end, and it just hasn't been like that in the past few seasons. And, I look to a guy in Chris Rumpf. He's got to get us back there because it used to be a destination spot, not only for the defensive end, but for the defensive line, period. I think we're still in a pretty good place when it comes to defensive tackle, but defensive end has been, lagging behind for a few seasons at this point.
No, absolutely, and you make some great points. I mean, Chris Rumpf is coming into a room that's is inexperienced at this point. Not a lot of snaps played, not a lot of proven depth. I think the additions of Darian Mayo and Adam Kasai. I think I like both of those guys. I think Darian Mayo has a chance to come in and possibly work his way. AJ Hoffler will be a true sophomore next year, and he came in at times this year and looked really good. But at the end of the day, we don't know. Maybe it's I think there are solutions, and I think they're still going to evaluate. I haven't taken a portal defensive intake off of the table quite yet. I think there's a chance possibly that a match and a fit shows up sooner or later. But again, that's all speculative. We don't know. And that all we have right now is the guys we have. So at the end of the day, whether Clemson goes in the portal or not for a defensive end, Chris Rumpf has to get this group ready, and he has to build that depth and get the guys that are already here ready to play. So yeah, that's a really good pick. He's got his work cut out for him for sure.
Yes, he does.
But it's not devoid of talent, and we know there are guys that we've just been kind of waiting on to step up outside of TJ. So Maybe Rumpf as a different coaching style than Lemansky Hall did. Maybe he was able to bring something out of Cade Denhoff. Maybe Zaire. We finally figure out if Zaire Patterson exists. Like, I don't know. And obviously, I already mentioned AJ Hoffler, really high on him. Staff is really high on him. I think he's a guy that's primed for a big leap too. So we'll see. But I think I'm already at my number 5 since I skipped my number 2 because we had overlap with Matt Luke. My number 5 most important person of the offseason is none other than Dabo Swinney. I think it's obvious the head coach, all the implications of that are obvious. Dabo has a lot of decisions to make this offseason. And obviously he's done I think he's taken the right steps for the most part so far as addressing some of the issues. I think that the 2 new coaching hires I thought Clemson desperately needed, he went and got them, and pretty swiftly, and I think that's big. But he also has a lot of roster decisions to make, whether it's transfer portal, whether it's scholarship management, all of that. He's gonna have to make some key decisions, and he has to decide what does he want this roster to look like at every single position group, because ultimately every decision comes down to him. It's whether they decide to go into the portal, ultimately it's his decision. What they decide to do about the quarterback situation and really only having 2 scholarship quarterbacks right now, and Cade Klubnik and Chris Vizina, I don't know. Well, we will have to see. Is everything good? Can you hear me?
Yeah. No, I'm good. Can you hear me?
Yeah, you sound good.
Okay. All right, good. My headphones just died, so I just have to roll with it like this. But yeah, I think that's a really good pick. I missed some of your stuff there because I couldn't hear. But look, Dabo Swinney, this program has been trending in the wrong direction for a few years now. Slowly but surely, trending in the wrong direction. And like you said, he started to make some of the corrections that I think are necessary, and that I think are going to start righting the ship, starting with Garrett Riley last offseason. This offseason, obviously, he hired Matt Luke and Chris Rumpf. I think those are 2 great additions to the Clemson family. I think those are great additions to the Clemson coaching staff. Obviously, the pedigree of both of those guys speaks for itself. So I think those things are good, but I think there's still probably some changes that Dabo Swinney needs to make, and he's really got to figure it out here, because at a certain point, it tends to go like this for organizations that peaked really, really high, like Clemson did, right? There's kind of a slow decline, and then all of a sudden they disappear, right? It's never this drastic drop off, right? They kind of slowly go down a little bit, and then it kind of slopes off a little bit more steeply. So I don't think Dabo Swinney's interested in letting that happen whatsoever, or seeing Clemson be relegated to a mediocre type program. But again, to your point, he's got some tough decisions to make. He's got to realize where Clemson is as a program right now, and truly right the ship. And it's all on him, because at the end of the day, the onus stops with him. It doesn't stop with any of the position coaches. It doesn't stop with any of the coordinators. It doesn't stop with any of the players. You are the leader of the program. You are the decision maker. You are the end all be all of Clemson football, and all the responsibility falls on you. So, I don't think that he's the wrong guy for the job. I think he's the only guy for the Clemson job at this point in time. But, we got to start moving back in the other direction. And it starts obviously this spring and this offseason. You got to continue to trend in the right direction. And I think, moving into my fifth pick, I didn't have Dabo Sweeney on my list, but that's a really good pick. I think the last one that I will go for is another wide receiver, and that's Antonio Williams. To
like that
me,
one.
he's a really important guy. We saw what he did and how explosive and dominant he was in his freshman season. And then comes his sophomore season, and it didn't go like any of us thought it would. And I'm sure it didn't go like he thought it would. He got it kind of banged up early, and it just snowballed from there. And he never really got healthy at all throughout the season. Played a little bit in the bowl game, but not really, right? Still battling back, still trying to get fully healthy. I don't think he was fully healthy in the bowl game. I think he just wanted to get out there and maybe run some routes and do some stuff. And he did. But I don't think it can be understated how important Antonio Williams will be to the success of this Clemson offense. I like Tyler Brown. I think he was great this season. But Antonio Williams is an absolute dominant receiver when he's healthy. And I think it's important that he doesn't allow this season of injuries and just like series of unfortunate events basically for him to hold him back. I really want to see his mentality this spring, and kind of see how he looks fully healthy back on the practice field. Look forward to seeing some practice reports about, how he's moving, how he's looking. Does he look like the old Antonio Williams, or does he still look hampered, right? Because I think a healthy Antonio Williams takes a lot of pressure off of those guys on the outside, because of the damage that he can do in the slot and the attention that he can garner from defenses because of what he can do. So I think he can be a pivotal piece for this offense, because he could do so much. He's a very dynamic and explosive player. So I think to round out my top five people heading into the offseason, I'll go with Antonio Williams.
I think that's a good pick. And you and I both, rave about Antonio and just his ability. And it would be, if you could have a healthy Tyler Brown, a healthy Antonio Williams, a healthy Adam Randall, and then couple that with, Troy Stellato and Cole Turner coming back, and obviously the true freshmen, Ryan Wesco, TJ Moore, those guys coming in. I think this Clemson wide receiver room has an opportunity to be really, really good. They have the opportunity. I want to.
Yep.
I want to emphasize that the opportunity. It's all about. I think it's first and foremost, it's all about health, and second, it's guys taking that next step. Adam Randall, can you be that guy? Because if you can be that guy, everything else, it changes everything for everybody else. And right. Tyler Brown is, does he make that next step? Does he not? Because it would be great if he doesn't have that, a similar sophomore season like Antonio Williams did, where couldn't stay on the field and all of that. And so if you have all of these guys together, healthy, I know it's been a tough ask to ask these Clemson wide receivers to be healthy over the last few years, but if you can stay healthy, I think it makes things so much easier for Cade. And couple that with you still have Jake Brenningstool, and obviously we know his ability as a pass catching tight end, and I'm high on this tight end room in general. There's going to be some options for Cade next year in the passing game.
Yep,
he's got to. So does he? If Cade makes that next step, right, the receivers have to be able to make plays for him.
Right. Yeah.
So
look,
both like of those things can come together.
I'm glad you mentioned it because, like you said, the talent is there in the wide receiver room. This wide receiver room is just not devoid of talent. Yeah. Much like a lot of position groups on Clemson that have underperformed in the recent history. It's not devoid of talent. They recruit really well. There's former 5 stars, former 4 stars everywhere, all over the roster. So it's not a group that's devoid of talent. You got plenty of talent there. And I guess just an honorable mention is our good old wide receiver coach. He's been on the hot seat, I guess, with the fans for a couple seasons. Basically, Tyler Grisham has taken some shots on the chin from the fans. Some of them very warranted, some of them maybe not, depending on what was said. But again, looking at him, like you mentioned, all the talent in the room, he's got to develop these guys as well, right? If a guy's coming in as a freshman and he looks better as a freshman than he does as a sophomore, and it's not due to injury, well, something's wrong. That's not good. So Tyler Grisham's got to get it together too. That's just an honorable mention. And then, you mentioned Jake Brenningstool. Look, he finished probably about as well as he possibly could in that bowl game. I mean, it was dominant. He looked physical. That's the Jake Brenningstool we need next year. Okay. He can't disappear for 2 and 3 games at a time. He can't just be out there lackadaisical running routes and not really running them efficiently or running them with any sort of purpose. And he's got to get better at blocking. I know he's a big, lengthy guy that can catch on the outside, and he's very athletic and physical. But you got to be able to block a little bit better.
At this point, I've kind of just. With me, I'm kind of just giving him the Jordan Leggett treatment. I'm just like, okay, well, he's just not going to block. I mean, and to Leggett's credit, he got better. He never became a great blocker, but he was serviceable by the time he left. I just it would be great if Jake Brenningstool can become a serviceable blocker.
Yeah, that's all I need.
And I think you've seen glimpses of. I think you've seen times where he blocked well, but for the most part, it's just it's been a struggle to get that out of him consistently. So that would be great. But obviously, he's worth having on the field with for his pass catching and athleticism alone. But it'd be much easier for Garrett Riley and everybody else if Jake Brenningstool could be on the field all the time, because he can do whatever you need him to do at a decent enough level. But listen, he wasn't on our list, but on either of our lists. But I think you could definitely talk me into it, because I think he needs to take that next step as well. Overall, I thought he had a nice season, but you need him to take that next step. He can't disappear. You want him to be a guy. You want him to be that guy that maybe he's a safety blanket, a downfield threat, whatever you need him to be, that he can be, because he has the ability, the physical tools and gifts.
And there's not at his best, there's not very many linebackers and safeties that want to guard a guy like Jake Brenningstool. He's just too big. He's too athletic. It's a matchup nightmare for defenses. But he's got to put in that effort and be more physical and deliberate when he's running his routes, because there were times last season where it just looked lazy out there. It looked like he didn't want to be out there, and that can't happen. He's way better than that. And he proved it towards the end of the season. So, like I said, I think our offense ended probably the best way they possibly could have with that game-winning drive, both for Cade, for the receiving core, just for the offense as a whole. Take that momentum into spring, and let's parlay that into something that looks a lot more like we would expect a Garrett Riley offense to look when it comes to 2024, because at the end of August, we'll be playing in Mercedes-Benz Stadium against the Georgia Bulldogs. So there ain't no warm-up game. There ain't no FCS to get right with. It's immediately to the grinder. It's immediately to an absolute brutal matchup. So Clemson's got to get right and get ready. So we'll see what they can do. I'm excited about what's going to happen in spring and what's going to come out of it. Hopefully we don't lose any big pieces to the transfer portal. We all know that's a possibility. After spring practice, there's always transfers. So hopefully that doesn't hit the Tigers too hard, and we can head into the summer workouts programs and be looking pretty good.
Absolutely, especially the guys we just named. I mean,
Yeah.
we just said they're the 5 most important. These are some of the most important people going into the offseason, and then you lose some of them, and you're like, oh well.
Whoops.
But time to reevaluate that one.
Yeah,
So
not gonna be good.
definitely changes things.
But yeah.
Yeah, I think that'll do it for what we had planned for tonight.
All right, yeah, we're gonna go ahead and turn it over to the chat section. So this is the portion of the show. I'm sure most of you guys have been in here and watched our shows before. I see we got 34 people in the comment section right now in the live chat. Please go ahead and smash that like button for us. If you're not subscribed, go ahead and hit that subscribe button for us. Support the channel. We got the super chat feature available as well. You can support the channel that way. But this is the time of the show where me and Jordan turn it over to the comments section and let you guys drive the show. So any questions you want to ask us, any topics that you want us to discuss, anything you want our opinion about, go ahead and get it into the comments section, and we'll spend the next little bit talking to you guys and chopping it up about what you guys want to talk about, and then we'll get out of here. Don't forget, me and Jordan are right here every Thursday at 7 p.m. for the All In Show. Every Thursday, 7 p.m., same bat time, same bat channel. We'll be here throughout the offseason. Me and Jordan don't believe in the offseason. It's against our religion. So we're going to be here talking about Clemson football, whether anybody here is listening or not. But we hope you guys show up and talk a little football with us.
Absolutely. Let's see what you guys are talking about. Go Tigers says 10-0-8-6. Oh, the numbers. Okay, player numbers. And TJ and Bryant, if he gets the weight, that's a ton of just raw talent. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, all of these guys we talked about, between Adam Randall, Troy Stellato, Antonio Williams, Tyler Brown, and then and obviously the true freshmen, TJ Moore, Bryant Westcott. Like we've seen glimpses and flashes from all of those guys. At least the 4 you named that have already played football at Clemson.
Yeah.
We've seen flashes from all 4, and really good things. We know they're talented, and so it's about staying healthy, taking that next step, and I think so many things will open up, along with obviously Cade making that next step in his development. Maybe this passing offense shouldn't. They have all the tools in the toolbox to be successful next year, but it's about whether they put it together. I thought they had the tools last year, and it didn't really work out the way we thought. So it has to be. It's got to be different. WB2DX or TX, I always keep forgetting that. He says, is Gunn our kicker going forward, and can he get the job done? You see, yeah, that's the question, isn't it? I mean, he is the apparent next in line, but obviously from late reports late in the season, he was still struggling making kicks in practice. It's not what you want. Gotta hope he makes that next development, or is it true freshman Nolan Hauser coming in, or who's
That's right?
I don't know how to pronounce his last name. I've been
Hooser
saying
or Hauser or
I'm not sure. I need to go back and listen to it. I think Dabo said it, and I forgot how
he said Hoosier. I think.
Did he say Hoosier? Okay,
yeah,
that's interesting. Okay, I'll have to remember that.
So I think he pronounced Hoosier. I'm assuming. Yeah, Go Tiger said Hoosier. Yeah, so Nolan Hoosier. Look, if Robert Gunn's not ready, hopefully Nolan Hoosier's ready, man. Like one of those guys got to figure it out.
Yeah.
Nolan's a highly recruited kicker, really, really good kicker. But again, we were saying some of the same things about Robert Gunn last year, and it didn't work out. Kicking's a really mental game. You can get in a rut and just really, really struggle to get out of it. And that seems to be very much the case when it comes to a lot of kickers. And obviously, Robert Gunn, for whatever reason, has not been able to work through it throughout the season. Hopefully he gets it figured out in the spring. But if not, we're bringing in a really highly touted kicker in Nolan Hoosier, and hopefully he can be the guy. But you need a consistent kicker, because you could see the second half of the season how much it affected Clemson and their decision making after they crossed the 50-yard line.
Go Tigers asks an interesting question. He says, with Clemson having one scholarship, who would you call from Bama, Julian Sand or Jeremiah Alexander? I almost said Jeremiah Smith, but I was like, no, he's not a Bama commit. That's a good question. I would – ooh. Man. That's a good question. I'm going to lean Julian Sand. And I think it's because and that's tough. I think a better question, Julian Sand's probably not, because honestly the quarterback you had the most involvement with on Bama's roster was Ty Simpson. But Julian Sand, I think, would give you obviously that fills that obvious hole in your quarterback. And Ty Simpson is the same class as Cade, so there would be some conflict there. But Julian Sand will be a true freshman this year. Mm-hmm. So I think I would take him. And as much as I love Jeremiah Alexander and how close and how heartbroken I was when we didn't get him,
yeah,
I think I would say Julian Sand, because I think having that obvious having that 24 quarterback changes a lot of things for Clemson as far as I think it just makes things a lot easier. But man, that's tough, because Jeremiah Alexander absolutely would come in and be a candidate to start. He's that good. And I know he didn't play much for Bama this year, but they were really good at edge this year. So I don't know. And they still have Jahad Campbell over there too, and maybe you give him a call. That would be nice.
We'd call anybody. Call them. we could use some edge guys for sure. We could find the scholarship somewhere.
Yeah. If we could take both, I would, absolutely.
Yeah.
Let's see. Michael Forster says that the O-line just improves this team is playoff bound. I mean, a lot of things, it makes things a lot easier, because it makes things easier for Cade, the rest of the offense. I mean, absolutely. You're running the football. It's going to be. I mean, expect running the football to be an identity of this team next year, like it has been. And,
I can't wait to see the Maffa show next year, man.
Yeah.
The
longer, and I feel pretty. Maffa has not formally announced he's coming back, but at this point, I think the deadline to declare for the draft is the 15th. You feel like at this, if you feel like the staff would have wanted him to make a decision earlier than that, to give them a chance to properly respond, because if you lose Shipley and Maffa in the same offseason, that leaves you kind of in line.
And at that, and the other thing is, like, what benefit is there to like waiting this late to declare? If you're going to go to the NFL, you're going to go to the NFL. Like, there's no reason to wait on the decision at this point.
Yeah.
All the grades are back. You know where you're projected to go. All the information's been released. At this point, so I'm gonna just put it out in the atmosphere, out in the world. He's coming back. So be the Phil Maffa show next year, and I can't wait to watch it. It's going to be exciting.
Daryl says turnovers need to stop. Yeah, obviously. Yeah, man. Honestly, a lot of things about this season change if the turnover issues weren't half as bad.
You know what? I was going to say something, but I'm not going to say it.
I didn't.
Nope. I'm not putting that out in the atmosphere. It's not happening. Yes, turnovers need to stop. But we'll see.
Gutter Rich 10, he asked an interesting question. He says, who has more targets next season, TJ Moore and Bryant Wesco or Coulter? So I'm assuming that you're saying TJ Moore and Bryant Wesco combined, or those three individually who has more targets? I'm actually not sure. But that's a tough one because it depends on regardless. It depends on how Cole Turner, progresses from his injury. Does he have a full spring? Are all of those things that is his rehab completely? Does his rehab go completely smooth? All of that. I guess it depends because say what you want about Cole Turner. This staff is really high on him. I mean, he's going to play. I think they really do think a lot of him. And obviously, we haven't seen TJ Moore and Bryant West they have not practiced at this point.
Yeah.
So that's a tough question. I would say I'm going to say Cole Turner until otherwise because, just because he's the experience. But
yeah,
I think that answer could change.
I think I'd probably lean. Yeah, if TJ Moore comes in and does what we think he can come in and do, I think I would lean TJ Moore. I wouldn't say Brian Wesco just because he needs to physically develop when he gets to Clemson. Now, how quickly he does that, I don't know. He may be ready to rock and roll by the time fall camp rolls around. I'm not sure how quick his physical progression is going to be. And Cole Turner, I think he could get lost a little bit behind an Antonio Williams and a Tyler Brown. That's a tough rotation to crack. Now, again, like you said, the coaching staff is super high on Cole Turner. And I think he can absolutely be a contributor on this team. But again, you got Antonio Williams and probably Tyler Brown just ahead of him. So that could limit some of his opportunity.
Absolutely. Tiggs asks, any chance Streeter becoming Bama's head coach? Yeah, no. No.
Yeah. Let's put that in the atmosphere. Streeter to Bama. Do it. They should hire Will Muschamp.
Jeremiah says we need to call Jalen Milroe. Honestly, Jalen Milroe in a Garrett Riley offense would be interesting. That would be really interesting. That would be something. But you're kind of still in the same spot because regardless, I think Jalen Milroe's athleticism opens some things up, and obviously he has a big arm, but
Right.
Obviously he has a lot. He's limited now as a passer. I thought he got better at points this year, but still not fully. His decision making is still not all the way there. But I don't know. We'll see. But yeah, I don't. I don't. It would be nice, but I don't think that's happening. Yeah, David. David asked, "Did y'all watch TJ Moore in the All-American game? 2 touchdowns. Yeah, 11 catches. And we talked about it earlier. Yeah. Oh, and that reminds me. For those of you watching, because we do these long shows, but we haven't put timestamps on them. So we started doing that. We're going to start doing that with this show. So if you guys come in late or you are on the rewatch, we're going to start putting timestamps for each individual section of the show, and loosely what topics we covered at each portion of the show. So that way, maybe you don't want to, if you don't, I don't know, maybe if you don't care what we have to say in the first 30 minutes or something like that, maybe, you want to skip ahead, or there's something you wanted to hear us go back and hear us talk about, you can do that. So make sure to check shortly after this stream ends, and we will have those up for you for those of you guys that want to go back and listen to something we talked about. Let's see. Yeah, Go Tiger says Jahad Campbell is playing mostly special teams and stand-up linebacker. Somebody wants to play edge. Yeah, I think that's his future. I think he's a great pass. He's a really great pass rusher. And I thought when Bama did have him rush the passer, he was pretty damn good. So, think, hey, if he wants to come, I'd take him in a heartbeat.
Absolutely.
Tiggs asks, who's RB2 next year? Yeah, and we kind of talked about. Did we talk about this last show or a couple shows ago?
Last show.
Yeah. Okay. I thought it was last show. I think you and I both landed on Jay Haynes as eventually
Jay
becoming
Haynes.
that guy. Obviously, you still have Keith Adams Jr. in the room, and still, and then of course you have Jarvis Green as well, and I'm not forgetting anybody. I mean, those are the scholarships, and then obviously you have freshman David Ajumame coming in.
Yeah, Ajumame.
So there's a lot of candidates there, but I'm gonna stick with I'm gonna land on Jay Haynes, and if I had to pick somebody else, if it's not Jay Haynes, I think David Ajumame could come in and work his way into that RB2 spot. Yeah, I think that could happen. Let's see. But I think Jay Haynes offers some. I think he has some explosive playability based off of his film and some of the limited things we saw this season.
He's super fast, man.
He can run.
Yeah,
I think he offers some interesting things in the running game. Just he has to, does he take that next step in his development and learning position? So far, CJ has shown a good job of getting these guys ready to play. I mean, because hey, listen, Keith Adams is. I mean, we talked about it with Dominique Thomas, who transferred out. Keith Adams and Dominique Thomas both, when they came in and played, they looked very capable. And those are guys that with not a whole lot of stars for them. Keith Adams was a 3-star. Dominique Thomas is a former walk-on, but those guys look really, really good. So I think the evaluations have been good, and the preparation has been good so far with CJ.
He's clearly maximizing those guys, coaching them up. So I got no doubt David Ajumame will come in and probably push for a little bit of playing time. But, I think it's going to be the film office show, and then your change of pace guy, your home run guy will be Jay Haynes. And I think their two styles complement each other really well because you got the home run speed of Jay Haynes and then just the physicality of Phil Maffa running into you repeatedly. That's enough to break a defense down in 4 quarters.
Absolutely. Yeah, Jeremiah, Maffa, Haynes, Green, Adams, Ajumame, all studs. Yeah. Yep. This is a really good running back room. I mean, so you have a lot of options. So that's the good thing. And that's why, we felt good, even with Will Shipley heading on to the NFL, you still feel like the running back room is in a good spot. And obviously the future is really good. With Ajumame coming in, and obviously CJ Davidson in next year's class. You've got some dudes. I'm sorry, I said CJ Davidson, Gideon Davidson. Why was that? It's been a long day. I don't know why I was thinking CJ. Yeah, I think I was saying CJ Spiller earlier, and then I conflated the two. Gideon Davidson, my fault. Go Tiger says, I don't know if Wesco plays because he's 170. He needs weight, and the staff has already said that. Yeah, I mean, it's possible. Hey, T. Higgins came in pretty small too.
He did.
He was a beanpole or whatever you want to call him, and he still played a decent bit his freshman year. So, I think the good thing is he's coming into the spring, like we've mentioned. It's a good, he's going to have a chance he's going to come in and be able to get that nutrition and strength program in early on, and I think that'll pay dividends for him in the fall. So, I don't know. I still think Wesco could come in and play early because I think he's that naturally gifted of a receiver. So I think he can. I think he has I think he has enough time for them to kind of figure that out. Let's see. Oh, got a super chat, another super chat from Alexander, $5. Thank you so much. He says, thanks for another great show. Well, thank you, Alexander. If Dabo did take the job at Bama, is Jeff Scott the consensus to be the new head ball coach at Clemson, or would it be Tony Elliott? That's an interesting question. I would doubt it. I doubt it would be Jeff Scott or Tony Elliott. I think that's a really good question, and because I have not heard any otherwise. I think the plans for when Dabo decides to move on, I don't know if those are fully. I don't think those are fully realized yet. I really don't know what direction they would go, and that's a scenario that it's interesting to think about, but obviously I'm not ready for that to happen anytime soon. I don't know. Because I guess it depends on what Clemson as a administration wants to do, because do they want to have some sort of consistency from Dabo to the next coach as far as the culture and how the program runs? Because if so, well, yeah, they're going to hire a Dabo, probably going to hire a Dabo assistant.
Yep.
But I don't know. I just, there's not a lot of obvious guys on the staff or around him right now. I think you give Mike Reed a ton of consideration. Been in the program for over a decade. Dabo has, placed a lot of trust in him, and he's been around a long time. Mickey Khan is obviously a close friend of Dabo. He's the assistant. He's co-DC, safeties coach, all that, and he's been kind of Dabo's right-hand guy for a long time. So that could be something that happens. I don't know. That would be interesting.
Brent Venables, you got to call him at least.
I think you call him, but
I don't think he's coming, but you got to call him.
Yeah, that's the thing, because I think as much as Brent Venables loves Clemson, I don't think he loves Clemson more than Oklahoma.
He's right where he wants to be.
Right.
But like I said, if I'm Clemson and the job's open, I'm at least giving him a call. But I think Mike Reed would be a really good option if they were looking to, kind of continue and go in house and do something like that. I think he's probably, out of everybody on the staff right now, I would feel most comfortable with that hire. If that's the direction that they were looking to go, instead of going to somebody on the outside. But again, I think Clemson could go get, a really good coach if they wanted to go.
I think they could get a good name. I think one of the things that's interesting is obviously the situation with Clemson and the future of realignment and conference realignment and all that. I think that could be a deterrent for some coaches, because obviously there's not, Clemson as of now does not have a clear landing spot if they were to leave the ACC. Obviously, the SEC and the Big Ten are the goals, but we don't know. I mean, there's nothing concrete yet. So I think that could, that makes things really interesting. But I think Clemson in a vacuum as a job would be really attractive to a lot of head coaches from roster standpoint, recruiting standpoint, resources, investment, all of that. I mean, Clemson, whatever coach, comes to Clemson, they're going to get more than substantial backing. And obviously the fan base is extremely loyal. The expectations, obviously following it's not to the level of following Nick Saban, but Dabo is the greatest head coach in school history. That's still a tough shoes to fill. 2 national championships, all of that. So that would be interesting, though. It's an interesting hypothetical.
Hopefully, we won't have to worry about that for many years.
Yeah. Let's. I'm okay with putting that one off.
Yeah. Hopefully we don't got to make that decision anytime soon.
Go Tiger says, one reason I say that, Jordan, is because if all is healthy, in regards to Wesco, with Brown, Moore, Randall, Troy Cole, Antonio plus Noble and Running, we have the depth to let him get the weight. But if he is a baller like Brown was, then you have to play him. Yeah, I mean, you do have that option. I agree. I mean, you have the option. So you don't need Wesco to come in and you don't have to rush him and rush his physical development or anything like that, because you have the numbers and depth at receiver. But I think I think Wesco he has an opportunity, regardless to come in and play early just because of his physical ability. So and like you said, like if he's a dude, it'll be obvious, and so we have to get him on the field, and that's what's going to happen. So, and I think with receiver, the staff has shown they're willing to do it. I mean, with Antonio Williams and Tyler Brown, two guys came in, we cannot not play these guys. Yeah, they have to play. They're already too good. Yep. So, I don't know. Maybe it's different because, Tyler Brown and Antonio Williams, obviously two in-state guys. I would like to think there's not preferential treatment there, but who knows? I don't know.
Could be.
Let's see. All right. Anything? Oh, in regards to Clemson, potential Clemson's next coach, he said, I would call Jamie Chadwell or Eli Drinkwitz. Those are two names that are, they obviously don't have the they don't have the appeal that maybe some of the bigger name coaches are, but those are two really good football minds and really good head coaches that have been program builders. So, I mean, I wouldn't hate those. I think Clemson could do a little bit better, but I think those are not those are both interesting names and names I would have on a list. And I think the thing with Eli Drinkwitz in particular, would he want to leave Missouri at this point because of the stability of where he is in the SEC? He's coming off of I think Missouri, as the current structure of college football is concerned, they have a lot of NIL advantages right now because they're allowed to pay kids out of high school. So there's some built-in advantages that Missouri has that job didn't used to have, that makes it a little bit more attractive. And obviously being in the SEC is a big deal in that portion. But obviously Clemson, from a salary standpoint, coaching salary standpoint, they absolutely overshadow Missouri as far as that's concerned. So the resources he would get at Clemson would make it interesting. And with Jamie Chadwell, he's a guy that I don't know. He's a guy that's been thrown around in tons of coaching searches, but it never really has gone anywhere. I don't know if that's he's not interested in leaving Liberty or before that Coastal Carolina. I don't know. That's interesting though. Those are two interesting names. They're two good football coaches. I like both of them. All right.
All right.
I think that'll do it.
All right. Well, let's go ahead and wrap it up for tonight's show. We got 39 people in the live chat right now. Thank you guys so much for showing up, getting in the live chat, commenting, hanging out with us. Hope you guys hit that like button if you haven't before you get out of here. Also subscribe if you haven't. Been on for over 2 hours now, so we're going to go ahead and wrap it up. But lastly, just good luck to Saban and whatever he does next. Hopefully he can do some work in fixing what is this crazy world we call college football right now, or at least influencing some change now that he's out of the coaching realm, and can do stuff like that now. But hope you guys have a great week, a great weekend. Enjoy your Martin Luther King Day. Hope everybody gets a nice day off and all that stuff. But we'll see you guys next time. Jordan, you want to send the people away?
Yeah. Once again, thank you guys for tuning in. We are in full swing off-season mode. We'll have more. Obviously, we kind of touched on it a little bit, stuff we thought about heading into the off-season. But, we're going to be full dive into what Clemson does for 2024 next week and all of that entails. So really excited to get into it. Really starting this new year. Still feels weird to say that it's 2024, but same old show, new year, same show. So we'll see you guys next week, and thank you guys for watching.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you guys. Gut Rich, yes, we did mention that. If you go back to the beginning of the show, you'll see us talk about that. But that'll do it for tonight's show. Thank you guys so much for hanging out with us every Thursday, 7 p.m. Be right here to hang out with me and Jordan as we talk about the Clemson Tigers and what is to come. But until next time, I'm Tiger Paul Craven. He's Jordan Bowman. Go Tigers.
Later, y'all.